The final table style option I want to explore is the option called Total Row. When we tick the option Total Row, we're thrown to the bottom of our list. And at the foot of the actual column, I can see a value. This is actually the sum of the actual values. And when I click on it, I can actually hit a drop down and change it. I could change it to the average. And this is the average of the actual values, which when we looked at an earlier video, we determined the average was 149, 5 and a third. So the total row gives you a drop down at the foot of each column. I could sum the actual values, I could work out the average of the target values, and I could count the last names. And so there's 270 records. If I was to turn off the total row, they would disappear, and if I was to retick it, they would reappear as they were last set. Now the interesting thing to look at is when we click on any of these values, so I'm going to click on the value at the foot of the actual column, and I look up in the formula bar, even though that's the sum of the actual values, it's not using the sum function. It's in fact using a subtotal function, which might be new to you. Also at the foot of the target column where we average the target values, it's also using the same subtotal function, and when we counted the last names, it's also using the same subtotal function. The subtotal function is a useful function in that it does a number of things. The subtotal function will average, count, do a numerical count, find the maximum, the minimum, also the sum, and other functions as well. The difference is the subtotal function performs all of these depending on what number is specified as the first parameter or argument in the subtotal function. For example, at the foot of the last names, I'm saying the subtotal function is applying 103. At the foot of target, it's applying 101, and at the foot of actual, it's applying 109. 109 actually means sum, but it only sums those records that are visible. Target is using 101, which is average, but it only averages those values that are visible. And count, 103, only counts those values that are visible. The beauty of this approach is that when we actually filter, let me turn my filter button on, and I actually say that I want to filter a certain region by clicking the drop down on region and choosing maybe Tauranga and OK, it's showing me that there are only 42 from Tauranga, and this is the average, and this is the sum of the actual for just those records that are visible. So the beauty of the subtotal function is it uses a number as the first parameter, and if you look at your notes, the number 9 is to sum, but sum all records, whether they're visible or not, whereas 109 only sums what's visible. And this is very good for a list which we have a tendency to filter. If I then clear that filter and go to the bottom of my list, you'll see that those values are now reflecting the fact that all the records are visible. Notice also that when I'm sitting at the foot of last name, that it's not counting the column B, it's actually counting last name and using the word last name. And at the foot of target, it's not actually averaging this particular column F, it's actually averaging target. Something that we're about to look at is something called named ranges. When we formatted this particular table as a table, it gave it the name, as you can see up here in the Table Tools Design tab, it gave it the name table. So I'm going to change that name to Target Table. And this particular range now, that is A1 to H271, has got the name Target Table applied to it. And it also recognizes each of these column headings. So the subtotal function is a very powerful function, and we'll see it again when we come to the chapter called Subtotals.